Trauma, post-traumatic stress, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. We'll look at what comprises these diagnoses of clustered symptoms and how they impact our ability to cope. Then we'll take a closer look at relational traumas, the trauma category we believe partners of sex addicts fall into. What is trauma and post-traumatic stress? Trauma defined. Two kinds of trauma exist: physiological trauma and psychological trauma. Each involves an injury that takes place during an extrinsic or external event. Physiological trauma damages our bodies and our psyches. In this section, we will focus only on the psychological form and its impact. Reports and vividly colored photos and video footage of traumatic events fill our newspapers and news shows every day of our lives. All who watched as airplanes crashed into the Twin Towers in New York City on September 11, 2001, know how a traumatic event looks and feels. Our awareness that thousands of family members with loved ones trapped in those buildings experienced unspeakable horror as they watched the same drama unfold inflicted us with a measure of their pain, but only a measure. For the family members themselves, the trauma was far more devastating. Author Abigail Carter was among them. She writes, "The phone rang. It was my husband, telling me that he was at Windows of the World in the World Trade Center. There's been a bomb," he said. I had been preparing my 6-year-old daughter for her second day of first grade, balancing my 2-year-old son on my hip, and I was distracted. "Okay," I managed to say. It was 8:49 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. He never came home. Before 9/11, Abigail believed she had everything she wanted in life, including a loving husband and 2 precious children. But in one destructive moment, her life was forever broken into 2 starkly different chunks, before 9/11 and after 9/11. Though we felt her faceless, nameless pain from a distance that morning, our lives were not irreparably altered forever. Abigail was at the personal epicenter of that traumatizing event. Our second-hand observations could never enable us to grasp the extent of what she endured that day or in all the days that followed it. Trauma remains a very personal experience. Though psychological traumas don't generally involve blood, their wounds can damage and cripple us just like those that wound our flesh. Actually, in many ways, their damage can be more severe and less likely to heal because psychological trauma wounds remain invisible. They are often overlooked, mislabeled, or misunderstood. Psychological trauma frequently accompanies natural disasters and catastrophic events, but it also accompanies personal and relational traumatic events such as sexual abuse, rape, domestic violence, ongoing emotional and verbal abuse, long-term extreme poverty, and sexual betrayal. Such events cause intense psychological pain and overwhelm our ability to cope or to readily integrate the violations and emotions produced by these experiences. When traumatic events invade our lives, we feel shocked, rocked to our cores, and no longer safe in our world. Like a boulder dumped into a still pond, trauma generates ripple-like symptoms that move outward from the point of entry, ultimately impacting multiple areas, just as it did in Catherine's and Abigail's lives. Trauma's symptoms and its long-lasting effects. The symptoms experienced following emotionally traumatic events may vary from person to person depending on several factors, including personal history, the type of traumatic event experienced, the amount and kind of support available to help one grieve and heal, and whether the victim remains in an unsafe environment or relationship. But regardless of these factors, a long list of typical symptoms flood into our lives, some immediately and others delayed in their arrivals. These symptoms can include the following, among others: hyperarousal, helplessness, sleeplessness.